He was the most untouchable man in the city. Until one woman cracked open the files he thought no one would ever see. A hidden USB drive. A press conference that named him on live TV. And a midnight meeting in an abandoned rail yard, where the hunter finally became the hunted. This isn't just a story about corruption. It's about the price you pay when you choose the truth over silence. Stick around because what happens next will make you question how safe the truth really is. And hey, if you love stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The mornings at the Seattle Police Department always started the same, like a copy of the day before. The faint beep of the ID scanner at the security gate, the click of the latch, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. Claire Hayes swiped her badge, stepped into the long dim hallway, and her footsteps echoed like the building itself was still asleep. The records division was buried in the basement, 3 flights down, cut off from sunlight and fresh air. Stairwell was too narrow, lit by tired fluorescent tubes that flickered as if deciding whether they wanted to keep working. In the rainy season, and in Seattle, that meant most of the year, the damp seeped into the walls, leaving pale stains on the concrete. Claire had been here for 8 years. It wasn't the life she imagined. She'd once dreamed of being a reporter, chasing big stories, and shaking the system. But when her father got sick and her mother was drowning in medical bills, she traded ambition for stability. Filing and archiving case files in the police basement wasn't exciting, but it was safe. At least she thought so. That Tuesday afternoon, she was halfway through sorting a stack of old reports when the sharp sound of polished shoes on tile broke the monotony. She looked up and froze. Ethan Hawley stood in the doorway. He was taller than she remembered, lean but solid, hair cropped short. His eyes were the same shade of dark brown she'd known in college, but there was a weight in them now. Years ago, they'd been inseparable, quietly in love, bound by a shared belief in truth and justice. Then Ethan left for the East Coast to train with internal affairs, and Claire stayed behind. There was no fight, no breakup, just silence. "It's been a while," he said, his voice deeper now, steadier. "Yeah. What are you doing here?" "Internal affairs. Just transferred in." No smile, no small talk. But something in his expression told her this wasn't just a friendly drop-in. The records division wasn't just rows of shelves. There were locked cabinets, a steel vault door for classified cases, and a silence so thick it felt intentional. Claire had learned over the years that every file here was a story, someone's life, sealed in ink and paper. But that week, as she prepared for a quarterly audit, she noticed things that didn't fit. Photographs swapped out for blurry copies. Investigators' signatures missing. Cases marked closed without any record of a trial. One name kept showing up like a shadow: Captain Robert Vaughn. Vaughn was a decorated senior officer, a department poster boy, the kind of cop who got his face on recruitment brochures. Yet in these files, his name was linked to questionable raids, vanishing evidence, and cases that ended in silence. Claire brought it to her supervisor, Deputy Chief Harold Owens, a calm, silver-haired man who'd always seemed fair. He listened, then gave her a slow, measured look. "There are things you don't need to know," he said. "If you want to keep your job, you stay quiet." The next day, Ethan came down to the basement again, this time under the pretense of pulling an old case file. When she told him what she'd found, his expression darkened. "I'm investigating Vaughn," he said quietly. "But I'm missing pieces. If you can help me, we might be able to nail him." Claire hesitated. "And if I get caught?" "Then you tell them you were helping me. That's not exactly a get-out-of-jail-free card. I'll protect you." The words might have meant something different years ago. Now they just left her unsettled. But somewhere inside her, the part that had once wanted to be a journalist was stirring. That night, she stayed late, copying files onto a small encrypted drive she kept hidden in an old sunglasses case. The basement was silent except for the hum of the computer, and the slow tick of the wall clock. Then she noticed the security camera above her desk. It had been turned, no longer aimed at her workspace, but toward the doorway. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop now, unless you want your name in the next file." 3 days later, Ethan called her. "We need to meet, off the record." They chose a dive cafe near the docks. The lighting was dim, the air thick with old cigarette smoke, and the only customers were truckers and dock workers. She slid a folder across the table. Ethan opened it, flipping through each page with quiet focus. "This isn't just about him anymore, is it?" he asked. "No," she said. "It's about my family." The file contained her uncle's arrest record from 10 years ago, a case that had never made sense. He'd been accused of armed robbery, but the alibi was strong. The evidence had disappeared before trial. Now she had proof: altered witness statements, evidence filed under the wrong case number, and Vaughn's signature on the report. Ethan's eyes met hers, steady but grim. "This changes everything." The following Monday, Ethan was gone, suspended for violating investigative protocol. His office was sealed, his computer wiped. That afternoon, Claire was summoned to a meeting. Owens was there, along with 2 men she didn't recognize. One slid a document toward her, a formal statement admitting she had accessed classified materials without authorization. "Sign it," they said, and she could walk away quietly. "No charges," she didn't touch the pen. "You're making a mistake." Owens said softly. "Maybe," she replied, "but it's mine." That night, she sent every file she had to a journalist she trusted. She watched the progress bar on her laptop inch forward, her hands trembling only when it was done. The next morning, the department was in chaos. Vaughn was furious, accusing her of being the leak. And then, just as it seemed they had her cornered, Ethan walked into the conference room with a manila envelope. "I think you're missing these," he said, dropping it on the table. Inside were the files Claire thought had been erased. Ethan had backed them up before his suspension. Vaughn was arrested later that day. Not convicted yet, but his reputation was in ruins. Others, those who'd helped him, still walked free. By the end of the week, Claire's badge didn't work anymore. She packed her things in a cardboard box. Outside the building, she got a text from an editor at a major newspaper. "We want you on our investigative team." Ethan was waiting near the exit. "This time," he said quietly, "I'm not going to disappear." She smiled faintly but said nothing. The air outside was cold and sharp, making her breathe deeper than she had in months. She adjusted the strap on her bag and walked away, the hard drive pressing against her side like a second heartbeat. Claire's new job began, with a squeaky chair and a desk that looked too clean to belong to anyone real. She stood at the edge of the investigative newsroom, clutching a cardboard box with her meager possessions: a box cutter, a chipped coffee mug, and a dried-up highlighter. Overhead fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a pale, artificial glow across the room. Keystrokes rattled from every direction. A phone hummed somewhere nearby. In the break area, the office coffee machine wheezed and sputtered like it was on its last leg. Nobody stared at her outright, but Claire could feel the subtle ripple of awareness moving through the room. News traveled fast here, and the fact that she'd helped take down a police captain traveled faster. "Claire?" The voice came from the far end of the room. A woman in her 50s approached, short platinum hair, shoulders squared, blue eyes that didn't miss much. She extended a firm hand. "Linda Morris. I don't believe in long introductions. You'll sit here, log in, and don't touch anything without asking me first." "Got it," Claire said, setting her box down. Her new desk faced a wall, barely large enough for a monitor, a keyboard, and a notebook. To the left was a narrow window, overlooking the alley, where a dented metal dumpster sagged under the Seattle rain. She powered up the computer, keyed in her new credentials, and the newsroom shared drive exploded onto the screen. "Ongoing investigations. Legal reference files. A color-coded spreadsheet labeled deadlines. Linda leaned against the desk, handing Claire a paper cup of coffee. Don't trust a case file that looks perfect. The good stuff's usually messy. The messy stuff someone's tried to bury. You already know that, don't you? I learned that in the basement, Claire said, accepting the coffee. And I paid for the lesson. Good. Linda nodded. You're not fragile. But hear me. Vaughn was the headline. The rest of it is still out there. They'll come for you, your computer, your apartment, your car. Have you changed your passwords yet? 3 times before I walked in here. 2-factor authentication? On. What about your personal laptop? It's never touching the newsroom network. Keep it that way. Linda's voice dropped a notch. And if you notice anything strange, locks, windows, mailbox, don't touch a damn thing. Call me first. That last bit made something coil in Claire's gut. She nodded anyway, understood. The rest of the morning was spent sifting through the flood in her inbox: lukewarm welcome notes, polite lunch invites, and a scattering of anonymous messages, some praising her, some calling her a snitch. Buried in the noise was one email with no subject line and a single sentence. We know where you are. No overt threat, but cold and hollow in a way that made her skin prickle. She forwarded it to Linda. 2 minutes later, Linda walked past, said nothing, and just tapped the back of Claire's chair, a silent acknowledgement. At lunch, rain fell hard enough to thin the crowd. Claire stepped out into the alley to call her mother, assuring her the new job was fine, the work interesting, and that she was eating properly. Her mother asked about her health and her winter coat. Nothing about the police. When she hung up, a black SUV eased past the mouth of the alley, tinted windows, no temp tags. Claire stayed put, watching it slide by like it was just another SUV. In a city full of them. Only when it turned the corner did she go back inside. That afternoon, Linda dropped a thin case file on her desk. Start with this: missing person, last month. Police files incomplete. I want to know what's missing and who erased it. Name? Janelle Ortiz, 29, nurse. Her mother called 911 at 2:18 a.m. Said she never came home, no contact since. First unit on the scene. Linda's mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. Vaughn's team. Claire opened the file, and the old feeling came back. The cold columns of data. The brittle case notes, the empty fields where answers should be. The incident report had signs of editing. Metadata on the PDF showed it was exported after the case was officially closed. At the bottom, a strange line in the footer. See supplemental log #B. But supplemental log #B wasn't in the uploads. It wasn't in the physical index either. It was there, and not there like a shadow. She pulled her notebook closer, mapping the process. Who answered the 911 call? Who assigned the unit? Who signed off on the initial report? Who logged the first witness statement? One name popped up 3 times in places it didn't belong. Sergeant L. Pike. Not part of Vaughn's unit on paper, anyway, but consistently present at the transfer points in the chain. And transfer points meant access. Linda, Claire called as she passed. Sergeant Pike, he's in communications? Shift supervisor, sometimes helps out in records. Linda's tone sharpened. And by helps out, I mean, he knows where the keys are. Did they ever look at him after Vaughn went down? Linda shook her head. They tossed the public Vaughn's name like red meat. The rest stayed quiet. Claire tapped the footer line on the report. If #B exists, it's got to be on a parallel system. Black file, Linda said, like she was spitting out a stone. Shadow logs. Not subject to FOIA, not subject to audits. Only the insiders know where they live. Do we have an insider? Linda studied her for a beat. We do, but I don't burn them unless I have to. Tonight, take a walk through communications. Don't touch anything. Just look, memorize, then go home a different way. Claire nodded. Ethan's, she stopped herself. Don't rely on him, Linda said. It wasn't unkind, just the blunt edge of experience. People disappear. Procedures don't. Night dropped early, the kind that turned Seattle's glass towers into black mirrors. By the time the newsroom thinned out, Claire had her coat on and her earbuds in no music. Just a prop. She slipped out through the fire stairs, the metal grating rattling under her boots as rain pinned against the rails. She cut across 2 blocks to the communications division, a squat building with a glass front and its back pressed to a side street. Inside the lobby, a security guard hunched behind the desk, a baseball game flickering on his laptop. His eyes flicked to her press badge, barely focusing. Lost? He asked more out of habit than curiosity. I've got an interview on 3. Claire said, holding up one of Linda's business cards. He jerked his chin toward the left. Elevator. The car smelled faintly of disinfectant and metal. She punched the button for 3, then hit 2 instead. The hallway that opened was bright, almost surgical in its lighting. Signs pointed to dispatch, recording, storage. Frosted glass, she glimpsed a low rack of storage bins and a young tech hunching over a laptop. As she passed, the tech snapped the lid shut, but not before Claire caught a sliver of the screen. Supplemental_B_log J Ortiz. Her pulse jumped. She slowed just enough to read the room number on the door. From the far end of the hall came the click of hard-soled shoes. A man in his 40s, buzz cut, shirt collar stiff, a nameplate pinned to his chest. "Le Pike. You. Looking for someone." His voice was flat, the kind that didn't need to be loud to carry weight. "Interview on 3, Claire said, holding up the card again. Got turned around. "3rd floor, Pike said. She gave a polite smile, just enough to look harmless, and walked back to the elevator. On the ground floor, she cut to the side exit. Rain slapped her face, cold and sharp. The alley spilled into the overflow lot, sodium lights casting everything in a grimy yellow wash. Her Civic sat under one of them, wipers raised though she'd left them down that morning. The driver's door wasn't shut all the way off by the width of a fingernail. On the windshield, one drop of liquid clung stubbornly, thicker than water, glistening like oil. She didn't touch the car. She backed up a step and called Linda. "Don't lay a finger on it," Linda said. "I'll send someone. What if they're still here? Then they're watching you. Don't give them fear." Claire shoved her hands into her pockets, tilting her chin toward the rain like she was waiting for a cab. 2 minutes later, a beat-up Subaru rolled in. Its headlights blinked twice. Linda climbed out, followed by a tall man with silver hair and latex gloves. "Leo," Linda said. "Retired forensics. Still sharp." Leo circled the Civic without touching it, sweeping a small flashlight over the door seam. "No prime marks. Somebody had a key. Or they knew how to get in clean. I smell solvent light, but fresh. Anything missing?" Linda asked. "Haven't opened it," Claire said. "Good, now we will." Leo pulled a body cam from his pocket, clipped it to his coat, and nodded. "Open it slow." Claire unlocked the door with her own key, careful. Inside, everything looked exactly as she'd left it: spare gloves, an old notebook, a phone charger. In the glove compartment, a folded sheet of paper set where nothing had been before. It looked like a parking citation. Leo plucked it out with tweezers, slid it into a plastic evidence sleeve, and unfolded it. Black, blocky letters on plain white. "See log #B again. Some shadows are safer than light." "Son of a bitch," Linda muttered. "They're trying to lead you by the leash." Claire stared at the note. She remembered the report footer. "See supplemental log #B.bait. Tease. Or a trap. You're not going alone," Linda said, reading her expression. "Tomorrow we file an emergency FOIA for the Ortiz case. I know a guy who can push it. Pike will know we're coming, but he won't have time to wipe it all if we move fast. Tonight, you go home, Different route. And if anyone knocks, you don't answer. I won't, Claire said. Leo handed the bag note to Linda. Your car's fine, but change the battery in your remote. Thanks. Claire locked the Civic, turned her collar up against the rain, and headed out. She took 3 different routes home, crossing 3 bridges, and pulled into a 24-hour grocery store just to watch the parking lot reflections in the glass. No tail. But the sense of being followed clung to her like smoke. Her apartment building was old brick, with a 3rd-floor hallway carpet worn thin in the middle. She stood at her own door for a long moment, listening. The low hum of the fridge. The groan of pipes from the neighbor's shower. When she finally stepped inside and hit the lights, everything was exactly where she'd left it, except for one thing. On the kitchen counter sat a single quarter, heads up. The year, 2009. The state, Guam. Not something a burglar leaves. Something someone leaves to say, I was here. Claire took a photo and sent it to Linda. The reply came quick. Don't touch it. I'm coming over. She didn't. She sat in a chair, spine straight, eyes fixed on the coin. Outside, Seattle rain beat its endless rhythm against the glass. Inside, the quarter gleamed under the kitchen light, small, cold, unmoving. Watching. 15 minutes later, a hard knock rattled Claire's door. 2 sharp raps, pause, then one more. Linda's pattern. Claire opened it to find Linda standing there in a rain-slick trench coat, water dripping from the brim of her hood. Leo was behind her, the same latex gloves pulled snug, carrying a small, black case that looked like it could hold either a camera kit or a lockpick set. Linda stepped inside without waiting. Show me. Claire pointed to the kitchen counter. The quarter lay exactly where she'd left it, catching the yellow light from the overhead fixture. Leo leaned in, flashlight beam sweeping over the coin. No fingerprints. Not on the head side, anyway. Whoever placed it either wiped it or was wearing gloves. It's a calling card, Linda said flatly. They were in your apartment, and they wanted you to know it. Claire crossed her arms. To rattle me or to warn me? Both. Linda said, it's intimidation wrapped in an invitation. That quarter, Guam, 2009 means something to them. We'll figure out what. She glanced over her shoulder at Leo. Bag it. Leo slid the coin into a small evidence pouch, zipped his kit, and headed for the door. I'll run the year and mint location. Might give us a connection. Military. Bus, overseas deployment, something like that. When he was gone, Linda turned back to Claire. I told you Pike wasn't a small fish. He's tied into whatever's left of Vaughn's network. That note in your car? The coin here? This is their way of saying they see you, and they still own the shadows. I'm guessing we're going after the shadows, Claire said. Damn. Right we are, Linda replied. Tomorrow we put in that FOIA request on the Ortiz case. I'll fast-track it through a contact in the city clerk's office. It'll piss off half the department, but we'll have the official paper trail. Meanwhile, you keep your head down and your routine's unpredictable. Claire smirked without humor. Unpredictable is my specialty these days. Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked back at Claire. Ethan wants to meet. Off the grid, tonight. The mention of his name caught her off guard. Where? An all-night diner in Ballard. Booth in the back. He says he's got something on Pike, but it's not safe to send over text. Claire grabbed her coat. Then let's go. The diner smelled of bacon grease and old coffee, the kind of place where the vinyl booths cracked at the seams and the jukebox was permanently broken. Ethan was already there, hunched over a mug, his jacket collar turned up. He didn't smile when they slid into the booth across from him. I've still got friends on the inside, he began quietly. One of them risked a lot to slip me this. He reached under the table and slid a USB drive across the Formica. It's a fragment from the black file system. Ortiz's supplemental log #B. Claire picked it up like it was an unexploded shell. What's on it? Dispatch audio, raw, no edits. Pike's voice timestamped the night Ortiz disappeared. And something else, someone ordering the removal of her name from a holding list before the report was even filed. That's obstruction, Linda said. Straight up. It's worse than that, Ethan said. The voice giving the order? Not Pike, Deputy Chief Owens. Claire leaned back, her stomach tightening. Owens, as in my old boss Owens? The same, Ethan said. Looks like Vaughn was just the decoy. Owens has been running this network for years. Pike's just one of his runners. Linda tapped the table with a fingernail. If we've got Owens on tape, we've got leverage. But we can't go public yet. He's still got allies in the department and the city council. We need to lock this down tight. Claire's fingers curled around the USB drive. Then we start tomorrow. No, Ethan said. We start tonight. Before they realize this piece of the file's missing. Linda gave him a sharp look. You're thinking about going back into communications? I'm thinking about finding every single supplemental log tied to Owens before he buries them, Ethan said. His eyes met Claire's. And I can't do it without someone who knows how those files move through the system. Claire didn't hesitate. Then you've got me. They met in a grocery store parking lot an hour after the diner. Ethan's truck was parked 2 rows from the streetlights, engine off, windows fogged from the rain. Claire slid into the passenger seat, rainwater dripping from her hood onto the floor mat. You sure about this? Ethan asked, eyes scanning the lot. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, she said. He nodded, shifted into gear, and eased the truck into traffic. They didn't speak much on the drive. The city blurred past wet asphalt, reflecting red and green traffic lights. Storefront windows shuttered against the storm. Communications division looked different at night. The glass facade reflected nothing but the street lamps and the slow blink of a security camera over the side entrance. Ethan pulled into a delivery bay around the back, where an unmarked door sat under a leaking gutter. This one's badge controlled, he said, pulling a laminated pass from his pocket. Courtesy of a friend who owes me. The lock clicked, and they stepped inside. The hallway smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Claire pulled her hood down, heart steady but fast. Ethan led her past a vending machine humming in the corner, down a corridor lined with doors marked with bland labels, storage, file prep, internal use only. When they reached the door, Claire had memorized earlier. She stopped. This is it, she whispered. Ethan swiped the badge. The reader blinked green, and the latch gave way with a muted click dot inside. The room was smaller than she'd pictured, 2 short rows of metal shelving. A desk with a double monitor setup, and a single chair pushed slightly askew. One monitor was dark. The other displayed a login screen. Tell me you know your way around their system, Ethan said, taking the chair. I do, Claire replied, already moving to the shelves. She scanned the label's serial numbers, case IDs, and a series of black binders with no outward markings, except tiny embossed codes. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard. We're in. Pulling all instances of supplemental log across the last 6 years. Jesus. His voice was low, tight. There are hundreds. And most of them are cross-referenced to Owens. Claire found a binder with an embossed code ending in B. Ortiz. She slid it off the shelf and flipped it open. Inside were printed transcripts, grainy still frames from traffic cams, and a hand-scribbled note in block capitals. Transfer. Order complete, UPS. This is their hard copy backup, she said, sliding the pages into her bag. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Ethan froze, eyes on the door. We've got company. Claire ducked behind the shelving unit, pulling the binder with her. The footsteps drew closer, heavy, deliberate. A key rattled in the lock. The door opened, and Sergeant Pike stepped in, a steaming paper cup in one hand. His eyes landed on Ethan instantly. What the hell are you doing in here? Ethan swiveled in the chair, calm as if he'd been caught reading the weather report. Looking for the RT's supplemental. Owens wants it pulled. Pike narrowed his eyes. That's not your assignment anymore. Ethan shrugged. Owens said different. For a beat, Pike just stood there, the steam from his coffee curling into the cold air. Then he stepped forward, leaning on the desk. Funny, Owens didn't say a damn thing to me. Claire shifted her weight slowly, ready to move if Pike came. Any closer, Ethan smiled thinly. Maybe you're not as in the loop as you think. The tension cracked the room in half. Pike's gaze drifted to the monitors, and for a fraction of a second, Claire saw the realization hit him. The system was open. The search already running. Close it, Pike said. Ethan didn't move. Or what? The coffee cup hit the desk. With a dull thud, Pike reached for his radio. Claire stepped out from behind the shelves, binder in hand. You should probably think twice before calling that in. Pike's eyes snapped to her, surprise cutting through the suspicion. That's right, she said evenly. And if you think this conversation isn't already recorded, you're underestimating me. For a moment, no one moved. The hum of the lights filled the silence. Then Pike lowered the radio, his jaw tight. Get out, he said. Ethan grabbed the USB drive from the terminal, logged out, and stood. Claire slid past Pike without brushing against him, the binder heavy in her bag. They didn't speak again until they were outside, the rain washing over them. That was close, Ethan said as they ducked into the truck. Too close, Claire replied. And he knows we have it. Which means, Ethan said, starting the engine, Owens will know by morning. They didn't go straight home. Ethan drove in widening circles through the city, up along the waterfront, across the Aurora Bridge, doubling back through quiet residential streets where rain pooled under flickering street lamps. Claire kept one hand on the binder in her bag like it was a life raft. Every time they passed under a streetlight, she caught Ethan glancing in the rearview. Anything? She asked. White panel van, 2 cars back since we left communications, he said. Could be nothing, could be everything. Lose them. He took a sudden right, tires hissing on wet pavement, then threaded into a maze of alleys behind a row of old warehouses. At the far end, he cut the lights and rolled to a stop. The only sound was the ticking of the engine and rain dripping from a rusted fire. Escape. The van never appeared. They peeled off, Ethan said, but his voice didn't sound relieved. They wanted us to see them. Message received, Claire muttered. By the time she got to her apartment, it was past midnight. The hallway was quiet, the carpet damp with tracked-in rain. She unlocked her door and froze. The smell hit her first, not the usual mix of coffee and laundry detergent, but something faint and chemical, like fresh paint or cleaning solvent. Stay here, Ethan murmured, stepping past her. He moved through the apartment quickly, checking corners, closets, the bathroom. When he came back, his face was tight. They didn't take anything, he said. They were just here. Claire set the binder on the table and flipped it open, scanning the pages. Everything was intact. At the bottom of the last transcript, though, there was something new, a thin red line drawn under the words, Transfer Order Complete APs. And beneath it, in handwriting she didn't recognize, You're next, Hayes. Stomach turned cold. This wasn't here before. Ethan stared at the page, then at her. They were in here to make sure you found that. The phone rang. Not her cell, her landline, the one she barely used. Claire exchanged a glance with Ethan before picking up. Ms. Hayes, a male voice said. Calm, deep, measured. Deputy Chief Owens here. I understand you've taken an interest in some restricted materials. Claire kept her voice level. You mean evidence? Evidence, Owens repeated, almost amused. You have something that belongs to my department. I'd like it returned tonight. I'm sure you would. His tone didn't change. If you don't, things will become complicated for you. For your friends. And for certain members of your family still living in this city. Ethan took the phone from her. Owens, this is Holly. If you have something to say it to me. There was a pause, then Owens said, I already have. The line went dead. Ethan set the phone down slowly. He knows we have the binder. And he knows we won't just hand it over. Claire's jaw tightened. Then we hit him before he hits us. That means going public, Ethan said. Now, Linda's number was already ringing on Claire's cell. She picked up on the first buzz. Don't go home, Linda said without preamble. Either of you. I just got word Owens pulled a special warrant, claims you two are in possession of stolen police property. If you're found, they can arrest you on sight. Then we need to disappear, Claire said. Linda's voice dropped lower. Disappear and work from the shadows. I'll set up a dead drop for the binder. Tomorrow morning, we make Owens the story before he can make you the suspect. Ethan drove them out of the city, rain-slick highways giving way to dark back roads lined with dripping evergreens. They ended up at a cabin Linda used for out-of-town sources, squat, weather-beaten place with a single lamp in the window and a wood stove that clicked as it warmed. Claire spread the binder's contents across the kitchen table, the supplemental log, the dispatch audio from the USB, the still frames, all of it pointed to Owens ordering evidence buried in the Ortiz case. This is enough to burn him, Ethan said. But if we want him to stay burned, we need more than one case. We need the pattern. Claire looked at the pages, the neat typeface of official reports, corrupted by the scrawl of dirty hands. Then we build it, one black file at a time. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and relentless, as if the city itself was waiting to see who would blink first. By morning, the cabin smelled of burnt coffee and damp paper. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor, the binder spread around her in a messy ring. Ethan was at the kitchen counter, laptop open, scanning digital archives they'd pulled from the USB. At 7:03 a.m., Linda's encrypted chat pinned, secure. Line now, Ethan hit the speaker. We're here. Linda's voice came through, clipped and urgent. Owens just leaked to the Chronicle that you two stole confidential property during an unlawful break-in at Communications. The article reads like an arrest warrant. Claire felt heat rush to her face. So now we're burglars. Now you're in the narrative he wants, Linda said. We need to flip it before noon. I've booked a live segment on KPLX. Radio owner owes me from way back. We go on air with the Ortiz log, play the dispatch audio, and dump the stills online. Once it's public, he can't bury it without looking guilty. Ethan leaned on the counter. What's the catch? The catch is, Linda said, Owens will try to hit back before we go live. Which means we need to get you into the studio without anyone knowing you're coming. 2 hours later, they left the cabin in a beat-up Ford that looked like it belonged to a retired fisherman, courtesy of one of Ethan's old contacts. Claire sat in the back with a duffel of documents, binder pages sealed in plastic sleeves. Halfway into the city, Ethan's burner phone buzzed. He answered on speaker. You're making a mistake, Owen's voice said. No introduction, just venom. Think about your family, Hayes, about your mother's mortgage, about your brother's probation. Claire's grip on the duffel tightened. You've been watching them. I've been protecting them from the fallout you're about to cause, Owen said. You think the department will take the fall for you? You're the rogue archivist and the disgraced investigator. That's how the story will read. Ethan cut in. We'll see how the story reads in about an hour. Owens laughed once, a short, humorless sound, before the line went dead. Linda met them in the alley behind the KPLX building, her hair tucked under a knit cap, her press badge swinging from a lanyard. She hustled them through a side door, past a row of storage closets, and into a cramped green room with a coffee pot that looked older than the station. You've got 8 minutes, she said. When they cue you, go straight to the log and the audio, no side stories, no speculation, facts only. Let the audience put it together themselves. Claire set the binder on the table, flipping to the transcript with the underlined transfer order complete ops. This, the dispatch audio, and the timestamps. That's the spine. Linda nodded. Good. Once it's out, I've got 3 independent journalists ready to mirror it across the wire. Owens can't scrub them all. The studio was small, the air warm from the equipment. Claire sat in front of the mic, headphones snug over her ears. The host, a tall man in his 60s with a voice like weathered oak, gave her a brief nod before. The on-air light blinked red. Listeners, he began, you're about to hear something the Seattle PD doesn't want you to hear. Claire's voice was steady as she read from the log, each detail crisp, each timestamp precise. When she cued the dispatch audio, Pike's voice came through first, then Owens. Unmistakable, ordering Ortiz's name wiped before her report was even filed. The host leaned forward. And these materials came directly from the department's own shadow file system? Yes, Claire said. The same system used to bury cases tied to Captain Vaughn, and now to Deputy Chief Owens. Ethan's voice came in next, explaining how the supplemental logs were kept off FOIA requests, how they formed a hidden chain of altered evidence. Linda stood in the booth's corner, watching the studio clock tick toward the top of the hour. They were halfway through a caller's question when the producer's phone lit up. He stepped into the booth, pale. Police are here, he mouthed. Linda didn't flinch. Keep talking, she said. The host didn't miss a beat. Ms. Hayes, Mr. Hawley, any final message before we cut to break? Claire met Ethan's eyes, then leaned toward the mic. If anything happens to us after this broadcast, know that it wasn't an accident, and know exactly whose name to say first. The on-air light went dark. Linda grabbed the binder, stuffing it into her bag. Back. Exit. Now. They bolted through the green room, down a narrow hallway, and out into the rain. Across the street, 2 black SUVs idled, but as they melted into the lunchtime crowd, Claire realized something. Owens might have the resources to chase them, but now the whole city had heard his voice, and that was a wound you couldn't hide. By nightfall, the city had heard the taped clips of Owens' voice ordering the erasure of Ortiz's name had already been spliced into evening news broadcasts. On social media, the hashtag #LogB trended alongside grainy stills of the supplemental page Claire had read live on air. In the comments, strangers were tagging the mayor, city council members, even the governor. Claire watched it all from a borrowed laptop in a windowless motel room 2 miles from the station. Ethan was in the corner, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones to someone he called a friend in the bureau. Linda stood by the blinds, 2 fingers pulling them back just enough to watch the parking lot. We bought ourselves about 24 hours before Owens pushes back, she said. Claire rubbed her eyes. He'll come for us legally first. If he sends someone after us physically, he risks looking guilty. Linda glanced at her. You think Owens cares how he looks? Before Claire could answer, Ethan hung up. Feds won't move yet. They need more than 1 smoking gun before they put a sitting deputy chief in cuffs. Then we give them a whole arsenal, Claire said. The counterattack came at 9 a.m. the next morning. A breaking news alert flashed across every local outlet. Seattle PD announces internal theft investigation. Suspects include former officer Ethan Hawley and journalist Claire Hayes. The department claimed they had credible evidence tying the 2 to an unauthorized removal of classified materials from police property. The Chronicle went further, publishing a blurry still of Claire and Ethan from the night they'd entered communications. Pike's doing, no doubt. The accompanying article called them vigilantes and hinted at personal vendettas. They're laying the groundwork to discredit us, Ethan said, tossing the paper onto the bed. Not just discredit, Linda added. If they can taint you as criminals, the log becomes inadmissible in any court. No one will touch it. Claire paced the room. So we give them something they can't ignore, a second case. One that's still fresh enough to hurt. Ethan looked at her. Ortiz wasn't the only name in that index she saw, was it? Claire shook her head. There was another Marcus Trent, closed 2 months ago. Supplemental Log C. They spent the afternoon tracing Marcus Trent's case. He'd been a contractor who supposedly died in a workplace accident at a city-owned construction site. No autopsy report on file, no OSHA investigation, and the supplemental log was nowhere in the public record. Claire found his sister through a property record search. They met her in a coffee shop near Pike Place, the roar of the market muffling. Their voices. My brother didn't fall, she said flatly, sliding a USB stick across the table. He called me the day before it happened. Said someone from the city threatened him over a contract bid. I recorded it. Cops never took it. Ethan's jaw tightened. You mind if we play this? She shook her head. Claire plugged the USB into her laptop. A man's voice, Marcus, came through first, tense but clear. Then another voice, lower, clipped. Claire recognized it instantly. Pike. Back at the motel. They listened to the recording 3 more times. Lining up the voice patterns with dispatch logs Ethan still had access to. This ties Pike directly to a death, Linda said. And by extension, Owens, Claire finished. Linda straightened. We push this to the same network we used yesterday, but staggered releases, local radio, 2 independent podcasts, and a leak to the Tribune. They won't be able to coordinate a shutdown without looking like they're hiding something. Ethan checked his watch. We've got maybe a day before they try to pick us up for real. We need to stay moving. That night, they switched motels again, crossing the city under cover of heavy rain. The binder now had a companion, Marcus Trent's file, pieced together from scraps, interviews, and the damning audio clip. Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The sound of Pike's voice on that recording wouldn't leave her. Not the words, those were bad enough, but the casual tone. The ease of someone who'd done this before and expected to do it again. By morning, she knew Owens wasn't the top of the chain. He was just the highest link they could see. And if they wanted to survive, they'd have to pull the whole chain into the light. By midday, the Marcus Trent recording was everywhere. Local talk radio played it on repeat. Callers lining up to demand Pike's arrest. Independent blogs picked it apart frame by frame, identifying the background hum of a police dispatch console. Owens' office issued a press release calling the audio inauthentic and maliciously fabricated. It didn't matter, the city had heard it, and the sound of Pike's voice was seared into their heads. Linda's phone buzzed non-stop. 3 more tips came in this morning, she told them, scanning her messages. All from former department staff. Looks like your little broadcast kicked open a lot of locked doors. Ethan leaned over the map they'd spread across the motel bed. If we can cross-reference these tips with the list of supplemental logs, we can start building the whole network. Claire traced a line from Pike's name to a cluster of unsolved cases. We don't have time to build the whole network before Owens makes his move. We need to put everything we have into federal hands now, before he buries us with the charges he's cooking up. Linda exhaled through her teeth. There's one person at the Seattle FBI office I halfway trust. Agent Halloran. But once we go to him, it's out of our control. You ready for that? Claire nodded. If we keep holding this, we're just bigger targets. That night, under a steady downpour, they made the run to the federal building. Ethan drove a borrowed sedan with mismatched panels, the wipers squealing against the glass. Claire sat in the back with both the Ortiz binder and Trent's file wrapped in a contractor's trash bag. They parked 2 blocks away, approaching on foot through alleys. Inside, Halloran met them in a side conference room, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He looked like a man who'd seen enough mess to know better than to look surprised. "You've got 30 minutes before the wrong people start asking why you're here," he said, closing the blinds. "Show me." Claire laid out the binder, the USBs, the transcripts. Halloran didn't touch anything at first, he just listened, his eyes moving between her and Ethan as they filled in the gaps. When they finished, he nodded slowly. "If this holds up, it's enough to open a public corruption case. But you've made enemies who won't wait for indictments." "They're already moving," Ethan said. "We've been followed, threatened, and Owens is spinning a theft charge against us." Halloran tapped the binder. "Then you need to disappear for a while, both of you. Let me work this from my side." Claire hesitated. "Disappear where?" "Someplace Owens people don't control," Halloran said. "And keep your phones off." They left the federal building just before midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and empty. Halfway back to the car, Ethan stopped. Cold. Across the intersection, two figures leaned against a black SUV, smoking. Even at this distance, Claire recognized the squared shoulders and watchful stillness. Pike was one of them. He flicked his cigarette into the gutter and smiled. Ethan put a hand on her arm. "Don't break stride." They walked past without looking back. The SUV didn't follow, but the message was clear. Pike knew they'd gone to the feds. Back at their motel, Linda was waiting. "Halloran just called me," she said. "Owens is in full damage control mode. He's pulled every officer loyal to him into a special task force, translation, a shield wall. He'll try to make a preemptive move before Halloran's case sees daylight." "What kind of move?" Claire asked. "The kind that puts you in cuffs on camera," Linda said. "And once you're booked, the binder and the USBs become evidence under Owen's control again." Ethan leaned against the wall, thinking, "Then we can't just disappear. We have to force this into the open before he can control the optics." Claire looked at both of them. "We need a stage big enough that he can't shut it down." Linda's lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. "Then we give him a stage and put him right in the spotlight." The plan came together in under 12 hours. It wasn't elegant, it didn't have time to be, but it had the one thing they needed. Visibility. Linda called in every favor she'd been hoarding for the last 20 years. By dawn, she had secured a seat for Claire on a panel discussion about public transparency in law enforcement, hosted in the grand atrium of the downtown Civic Center. It was part of an annual police community relations forum, which meant the audience would be a mix of city officials, activists, and, most importantly, press. "If Owens wants to shut you down," Linda said, "he'll do it here. And when he does, he'll do it in front of a dozen cameras." Ethan frowned. "And if he doesn't take the bait?" "Then we still get you on stage with the binder," Linda said. "We still push the files. But trust me, Owens isn't the kind of man who lets someone else control the mic." They arrived an hour before the event. Claire wore a dark blazer, her hair pinned back, the Ortiz binder tucked under one arm. The atrium buzzed with the low murmur of reporters, the smell of coffee and damp wool drifting in from the rainy plaza outside. From the stage, she could see the first row of seats filling local council members, a few retired cops, two men she didn't recognize in tailored suits that looked more federal than civic. Then Owens walked in. He was in uniform, all brass and polish, his smile wide enough to photograph well, but tight enough to hide the teeth. Pike shadowed him by half a step. They took seats near the center aisle, and Owens' gaze found her instantly. He didn't look angry. He looked certain. The moderator began with pleasantries about bridging gaps and constructive dialogue. Claire kept her hands folded on the binder, waiting. When it was her turn to speak, she started with the Ortiz law dates, names, the audio clip that had already aired. The room shifted. A few people leaned forward. Others exchanged glances. Then she moved to the Marcus Trent case. She played the recording of Pike's voice, clear and unhurried. and let the silence afterward settle heavy. Owens raised a hand. "Moderator, may I respond?" "Here it comes," Claire thought. He stood, microphone in hand, his voice smooth. "Ms. Hayes is presenting stolen materials, taken during an unlawful entry into a secured police facility. These so-called logs are forgeries, designed to undermine public trust in this department." Claire stayed seated, meeting his eyes. "Then you won't mind if I hand them over right now of the independent press in this room, so they can verify them for themselves." Murmurs rippled through the atrium, cameras swiveled. Owens' jaw twitched. "This is evidence in an active investigation," he said, stepping toward the stage. "And you are under arrest for—" That was when Ethan moved. He stepped into the aisle, holding up his phone. "Funny thing, Chief, this entire exchange is being streamed live to 30,000 viewers. Say hi." A dozen heads turned toward him. For the first time, Owens' composure cracked. He glanced at Pike, who took a step toward Ethan just as two men from the front row stood and flipped open their jackets to reveal FBI credentials. "Deputy Chief Owens," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." Gasps broke out across the room. Claire's heart kicked hard against her ribs. Owens turned slowly, weighing his options in real time, before forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is a mistake," he said. The agents moved in. Cameras flashed. And in the corner of the room, Linda was already on her phone, pushing the story live before anyone could spin it. Ethan leaned toward Claire as the agents let Owens out. "This isn't the end." Claire's grip tightened on the binder. "I know. But it's the first time he's not the one holding the shadows." Outside, sirens wailed not for Owens, but for the other players in the network who had just felt the ground shift beneath them. And Claire couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in that noise, a bigger predator had just started moving. Footage of Owens being let out of the Civic Center went everywhere. By sunset, every local channel had run it twice, and national cable was looping it under the Chiron. Seattle deputy chief arrested amid corruption probe. The FBI statement was, "Terse charges of obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy." They didn't name Claire or Ethan, but the implication was clear. Their testimony and materials had sparked the arrest. They didn't feel safe. The morning after, the three of them sat in a corner booth at a diner off Highway 99. Linda kept her back to the wall, sipping black coffee. Ethan scanned the room between bites of toast. Claire stirred her eggs without eating. "He'll make bail," Ethan said. "Already has." Linda replied, sliding her phone across the table. The headline read, "Owens released pending trial." The photo showed him leaving the courthouse, smiling faintly, a hand on Pike's shoulder. Claire's stomach tightened. "Pike wasn't arrested?" Linda shook her head. "Not enough to stick yet. And if I were him, I'd be burning every scrap of paper that ties him to Owens." "Then we hit him before he finishes," Ethan said. "Take Pike down, and we cut off Owens' right hand." Claire didn't answer. Her phone had buzzed twice under the table. No caller ID. She checked the voicemail later in the restroom. The message was short, the voice distorted. "Owens is a pawn. You're playing on the wrong board." A click, then silence. By the time she returned to the table, Linda was sliding a manila envelope toward her, from Halloran. "He says it's from an old closed case, 2016, Narcotics Task Force, multiple officers under investigation. Guess whose name appears in the suppressed evidence?" Claire opened it. The pages were heavily redacted, but 3 lines jumped out. "Recipient, Deputy Chief Owens. Copy. Assistant Director Frank Lorimer. Western Division. Subject. Parallel reporting structure, operational secrecy. Lorimer," Ethan said. "That's not Seattle PD. That's DOJ Regional." Claire exhaled. If Lorimer was looped in, Owens wasn't just running a local racket. He was feeding someone higher up. That night, Halloran called. His tone was clipped, like he was talking while walking a crowded hallway. Hayes, Hale listened carefully. You were right. Owens isn't top of the chain. My office just got leaned on from D.C. to narrow the scope of the investigation. Translation: drop anything that leads past Owens. What about Pike? Ethan asked. Untouchable right now. And if I were you, I'd be somewhere far away from your usual beds for the next week. Why? Claire asked. Halloran's voice dropped. Because if the people above Owens decide you're a liability, they won't send a subpoena. They'll send someone who doesn't leave paperwork. The line went dead by morning. Linda had 2 burner phones and a plan. We go dark for a few days. Head south, keep moving, no paper trail. Ethan frowned. And then what? Then, she said, we dig into Lorimer. He's the shadow above the shadows. If we can tie him to the black file system, we prove this isn't just a dirty department. It's a dirty division of the Justice Department itself. Claire looked out the window. The rain had eased, the city still slick with last night's storm. Somewhere out there, Pike was burning files, Owens was lawyering up, and Lorimer was watching all of it like a man in the high seats of an arena. She turned back to them. Then we stopped playing defense. The first stop was Portland. Contact of Linda's and an investigative podcast crew gave them a safe loft to crash in. From there, they began tracing Lorimer's career assignments in Los Angeles, Denver, D.C. Each time he'd been in a city, there was a corresponding spike in lost evidence, unsolved officer-involved shootings, and missing person cases. Tied to law enforcement, Claire spent hours in the dim light of the loft's kitchen table, connecting red strings on a map until the pattern looked less like random corruption and more like a single, sprawling organism. Every one of these cities, she said, pointing, had a captain or deputy chief like Owens, and every time Lorimer was in position above them. Ethan leaned in. You're saying the black file system isn't Seattle's, it's national. Linda's jaw tightened. Which means we're not just up against a department or even a city. We're up against an infrastructure. On the third night, the loft's intercom buzzed. They froze. Linda crossed to the panel. Who is it? The voice crackled through. Delivery for Claire Hayes. We didn't order anything, Linda said. Silence. Then, you should check anyway. Ethan was already moving to the window. Down on the street, a man in a hooded jacket stood by the building's entrance, a plain cardboard box at his feet. He looked up directly at their window before walking away. Claire's stomach dropped. This isn't over. Ethan went down first. Not to confront the guy, just to see what was in the box. He carried it back up like it might have teeth. The thing was light, no rattling inside. Claire sat at the kitchen table. The map of Lorimer's network still spread out like a crime scene. She watched Ethan set the box down between them. You sure you want to open it here? She asked. I'm sure I don't want to open it downstairs in the street, Ethan said. He sliced the tape with his pocket knife. Inside was nothing but packing paper and a single manila envelope. No address, no return label. Ethan tipped it out onto the table. A photograph slid free. It was of Claire, taken through the window of her mother's house. Her mother was in the kitchen, her back turned, making tea. In the reflection on the glass, Claire could see herself. Standing in the yard, head bent over her phone. Beneath the photo was a flash drive. Claire's hand hovered over it. Linda crossed the room, took the drive, and plugged it into her burner laptop. A single video file, no title. She clicked it. The footage was shaky, handheld. Nighttime. A man's voice whispered coordinates to someone off camera. The camera panned to a parked sedan. A woman got out, Marcus Trent's sister. She crossed a dark street, clutching a folder. Then the video jumped, her body crumpled beside the car. 2 men in plain clothes lifted her into the back seat and drove off. The screen went black. Claire's pulse roared in her ears. When was that filmed? Linda checked the metadata. 3 nights ago. That means she's, Claire started. Ethan cut in, his tone flat. Alive, maybe. But not safe. The message was obvious. Lorimer's network knew exactly where to hurt them. They didn't need to find Claire or Ethan. They just had to squeeze the people connected to them. We can't just sit here, Claire said. If she's still alive, we have to, and walk straight into a setup? Ethan's voice was sharp. That's exactly what they want. Linda tapped the flash drive still in the laptop. Then we flipped the play. We used this. Whoever filmed it wasn't thinking about digital fingerprints. We track the device, trace the upload point, and we make them the hunted. Claire met her eyes. You think we can do that before they move her? Linda's jaw tightened. We don't have a choice. The trace took all night. Using an old toolkit she swore she'd borrowed from a cybercrime contact, Linda bounced through layers of proxy until she hit an IP that hadn't been scrubbed. Here, she said, pointing to the map on her screen. A storage yard. In Tacoma, Lorimer's people are sloppy when they think they're untouchable. Ethan was already strapping on his shoulder holster. We go now, Claire grabbed her coat. And if it's a trap? Ethan's look was steady. Then we spring it on them. They rolled up to the yard just after 3 a.m., a chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire, ringed the property. Rusted shipping containers stood in uneven rows, floodlights casting long shadows. From the street, it looked deserted. Ethan killed the lights 2 blocks away. They approached on foot, rain soaking their jeans. Claire's breath felt loud in her own ears. At the fence, Ethan found a spot where the chain had been cut and loosely twisted back together. They slipped through. Halfway down the first row of containers, a sound broke the stillness, the low growl of an engine turning over. Headlights snapped on at the far end, sweeping toward them. Move! Ethan hissed. They darted between containers, boots slipping on the wet gravel. Claire's pulse slammed in her throat. Behind them, the vehicle roared closer, the beam of its lights catching flashes of metal walls. They rounded a corner and froze. A container door stood open, dim light spilling out. Inside, on a metal chair, Marcus Trent's sister sat with her hands zip-tied in front of her. Her eyes went wide when she saw them. Before Claire could move, a voice echoed from the shadows. Nice of you to walk right in. 3 men stepped into the light plain clothes, but the weight of their posture screamed law enforcement, and one of them was Pike. The floodlights kicked on in a blinding wash, swallowing the shadows. Claire's pupils shrank to pinpoints. Her first thought wasn't fear, it was calculation. 3 men, 2 exits blocked, 1 hostage. Pike strolled forward like it was a social call. The rain beaded on his shaved head, darkening his collar. You've been busy, he said, eyes flicking to the binder tucked under Claire's arm. Ethan shifted, angling his body between Pike and Claire. Let her go. Pike's smile was slow. She's leverage, Halle. You taught me that. 2 of the plainclothes flanked out, hands near their waistbands. Claire could see the outline of holsters under their jackets. Not city issue, federal. I'm guessing Lorimer sent you, she said, forcing her voice steady. Pike's smile didn't falter. Guess again. That hit harder than she expected. If not Lorimer, then who? Here's the deal, Pike went on. You walk away from this drop the binder, drop the logs, and we all forget tonight ever happened. Keep pushing, and she disappears for good. Marcus Trent's sister shifted in her chair, the plastic zip ties biting into her wrists. Claire's mind was running, cataloging cover, angles, the distance to the open container door. Ethan's voice was calm, almost bored. You always were bad at math, Pike. 3 of you, 2 of us. Plus 1 armed friend who's been watching from the fence since we got here. Pike's eyes narrowed. Just as a sharp crack split the night, the unmistakable report of a suppressed rifle. One of the plainclothes men yelped, dropping to his knees, a red bloom spreading across his thigh. From the shadows behind the fence line, Linda's voice carried, "You boys forgot to look up." Chaos bloomed. Ethan lunged for the nearest gun, twisting it out of its owner's hand. Claire darted into the container, grabbing the chair and dragging Marcus's sister toward the door. Pike reached for her, but Ethan caught his arm, slamming him into the metal wall with a grunt. The second plainclothes fired wild toward the fence. Another suppressed shot rang out, and his weapon skittered across the gravel. "Go!" Linda's shout cut through the rain. Claire half carried the woman toward the cut in the fence, her legs rubbery but moving. Ethan was right behind them, shoving Pike away with a final punch before sprinting to cover. They burst through the gap, stumbling into the alley where Linda's Subaru idled with the hatch already open. "Get in!" she barked. They piled in. Tires spat gravel, and the yard fell away behind them. No headlights followed, but Claire didn't relax until the city lights swallowed them again. In the back seat, Marcus's sister shivered under Ethan's jacket. Claire met her eyes in the dim glow of the dashboard. "They're not going to stop," the woman said, voice shaking. "It's bigger than your files. Pike, he's just collecting for someone you haven't met yet." "Someone above Lorimer?" Claire asked. The woman hesitated, then nodded. "They call him the broker." Linda glanced at them in the rear view. "Then we've just been playing in the lobby. Time to find the penthouse." They didn't stop until they hit the freeway, rain streaking across the windshield. In the back, Marcus Trent's sister clutched Ethan's jacket, her voice barely above the hum of the engine. "Pike's not the top," she said. "Lorimer's not either." Claire turned. "Then who?" "They call him the broker," she whispered. "He doesn't wear a badge, he owns them." Linda's hands tightened on the wheel. "Then we've been fighting the doorman. Time to knock on the real door." 2 nights later, they finally saw him. The meeting wasn't planned, at least. Not by them. Claire and Ethan were cutting through the lobby of the old Fairmont Hotel, following a lead on one of Lorimer's shell companies. The place smelled of polished wood and expensive cigars, the kind of luxury that didn't ask for identification. Near the bar, a man in a tailored gray suit sat alone, a crystal glass of amber liquor in hand. His hair was silver at the temples, his smile polite but unreadable. 2 bodyguards lingered just far enough away to seem casual. He looked up as they passed. "Miss Hayes, Mr. Hawley." They stopped. Neither had given their names. "I'm told you've been turning over stones that were meant to stay put," he said, voice calm, almost warm. "I'm the man who put those stones there." Claire felt the air change colder, heavier. "The broker." His smile widened slightly. "Good. Saves me the introduction." He raised his glass in a slow salute. "I think it's time we discussed the terms of your survival." Ethan's hand hovered near his jacket, but the broker just chuckled. "If I wanted you gone," the man said, "we wouldn't be talking in a hotel lobby." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit. Hear me out." Claire stayed standing. "You've been pulling strings from the start. Owens, Lorimer, Pike, they all answer to you." The broker swirled his drink, the ice clinking softly. "They manage my investments. I manage the risk. And right now you two are volatile assets. Try liabilities," Ethan said. "That depends," the broker replied smoothly. "Hand over every copy of those files, and I make sure no one in my network so much as whispers your names again. You'll disappear, but in comfort." Claire met his gaze. "And if we don't?" The smile never reached his eyes. "Then you'll still disappear. The comfort part just changes." He slid a business card across the table. "No name, just a single number. 48 hours, he said, draining his glass. "After that, it's not a conversation anymore." They left the Fairmont without a word until they were 3 blocks away, rain slicking the pavement under their shoes. Ethan finally spoke. "He knows every move we've made. Hell, he knew our names before we sat down." Linda's voice came through Claire's burner phone. Then we stopped playing his game. You've got 48 hours. Use them to burn him first. Claire looked at Ethan. We hit him at the top. No more chasing Pike, Owens, or Lorimer. We go straight for the broker. Ethan nodded once. And we make sure the whole world's watching when we do. They holed up in a storage unit Linda had converted into a bare-bones war room folding table. Cheap desk lamps, maps pinned to the corrugated walls. The air smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. Claire spread the binder pages, USB copies, and Trent's audio in front of them. The broker survives because no one connects him to the system. We change that. Linda tapped a red-circled address on the map. Private fundraiser. 2 nights from now. Half the city's political class will be there, and so will he. Cameras, donors, press, perfect stage. Ethan leaned over the table. We get him on record admitting the network exists, tie him to the black files, and dump it live. He can't buy his way out in real time. Claire's eyes were steady. That means bait. Something big enough he'll have to respond to himself. Linda slid a thumb drive across the table. I pulled this from one of Lorimer's old servers. It's a ledger payments, transfers, offshore accounts. Enough to make the broker nervous. We let him think you're going to hand it to a federal prosecutor that night. Ethan grinned without humor. And while he's trying to stop us, we stop him, Claire finished. The plan was reckless, dangerous, exactly what they needed. The night of the fundraiser dripped with money crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and the soft clink of champagne flutes. Claire's dress was borrowed, midnight blue, concealing the mic taped to her ribcage. Ethan worked the room in a tailored suit, eyes scanning for threats. Linda sat in a surveillance van a block away, her voice a steady murmur in their earpieces. Targets inbound. She said. The broker entered like a man accustomed to owning whatever space he walked into. That same polite, empty smile. He shook hands, posed for photos, whispered in ears. Claire moved to intercept him near the marble staircase. Enjoying your evening? She asked lightly. He didn't break stride. If you're here to hand over the ledger, I suggest we step somewhere private. That's the thing, she said, her voice carrying just enough to be picked up by the press cameras across the hall. I'm not handing it to you. The broker's eyes flickered, just for a second. Careful, Ms. Hayes. Ethan appeared at her side, holding his phone high. On the screen, the ledger scrolled numbers, names, offshore accounts all streaming. Live to a dozen independent news feeds. A ripple moved through the crowd. Reporters surged forward, microphones out. This is your network, Claire said, her voice clear over the murmur. Every payoff, every cover-up, every name. And it's not going away. For the first time, the broker's smile cracked. Security closed in, but cameras were already flashing, questions being shouted, donors stepping back. In her ear, Linda said, "You've got the shot, now get out." They slipped out through the service corridor while the ballroom erupted into chaos, reporters swarming. Security scrambling, the broker surrounded but too smart to lash out on camera. By the time they reached the street, Linda's van was already rolling up. Ethan yanked the side door open, and they dove inside. "Tell me you got it all," Claire said, breathless. Linda grinned, eyes on her laptop. "Every frame, every word. And it's already mirrored on 6 servers overseas. They can't kill it now." From the rear window, Claire caught a last glimpse of the Fairmont. Police units were pulling up, blue and red lights cutting through the rain. Somewhere inside, the broker was realizing his untouchable world had just developed cracks. Ethan leaned back, exhaling. This isn't the end. Men like him don't go quietly. Claire clutched the binder one last time before sliding it into Linda's bag. Good. I'm not done talking. The van disappeared into the wet night, leaving the city humming with Questions, and a man called the broker facing the first real threat of his life. 3 days after the fundraiser, the broker was everywhere: morning news, late-night panels, talk radio. Instead of laying low, he went on live TV wearing that same measured smile. I have no idea why certain individuals would fabricate such claims. I trust in our justice system and will cooperate fully with any investigation. Ethan killed the volume with a hard jab of the remote. He's flipping the narrative, turning himself into the victim. Linda didn't look up from her laptop. And he's lawyering up fast. I just got word. There's a search warrant out for the newsroom servers. Claire stood still, a cold knot tightening in her gut. He's trying to cut off our data at the source. Her burner phone buzzed on the table. No caller ID. One line of text. One of you is selling the rest out. Check your own house. No one spoke, but 3 pairs of eyes did a slow, heavy circuit around the room. That night, Ethan asked Claire to step outside, away from the screens and the cell signals. They stood in the dim alley behind the storage unit. Rain dripping from the gutters. I don't think Linda's the leak, Ethan said quietly. But someone knew about the Tacoma backup drive. Only 3 of us, or someone's listening in, Claire cut in. Ethan's gaze locked on hers. Or the broker bought someone closer than we think. The next morning, a small package with no return address sat on the doorstep. Inside, a cheap burner phone and a single sheet of paper, handwritten in block letters. If you want to know who's selling you out, turn this phone on at midnight. Linda wanted to toss it. Ethan wanted to keep it as bait. Claire just stared at it, feeling the weight of a decision that could either crack open the broker's network from the inside, or drop them straight into his trap. The van's taillights vanished into the rain slick streets, taking Claire, Ethan, and Linda away from the chaos at the Fairmont. Behind them, the broker was still surrounded by cameras, flashing bulbs freezing his face mid-scowl, an expression the city had never seen on him before. For the first time, Claire felt the weight of victory, small, fragile, but real. The ledger was out, the network had a name, and the man who'd built it was no longer invisible. Ethan leaned back, his voice low. We just hit him in front of the whole city. Claire nodded, eyes fixed on the wet blur of streetlights outside. Yeah, now let's see how hard he hits back. 3 days later, she had her answer. The broker wasn't hiding. He was smiling into every camera, playing the part of the wronged philanthropist. Legal teams moved faster than the press cycle, freezing accounts, tying up evidence in court orders. Then came the text, no name, no number. One of you is selling the rest out. Check your own house. The victory at the Fairmont had been the high point. Now they were standing on shifting ground, and the next blow could come from outside the circle, or inside it. Claire didn't know which possibility scared her more. The burner phone sat on the table, between them like a coiled snake. No one touched it, but all 3 kept glancing at the clock. 11:59 p.m. Linda crossed her arms. This is a setup. We turn it on, we're giving them a way-in. Ethan shook his head. Or we get the one chance to hear something they don't want us to hear. Claire didn't say anything. She just reached out and flipped the phone open. For a moment, there was only dead air. Then a voice came through. Low, steady, unmistakable. Claire, Ethan, you're running out of time. Ethan froze. Claire's pulse kicked. She knew that voice. Detective Harold Pike, the man they'd cornered weeks ago, the one they'd thought was out of the game. You think the broker's your only problem? Pike went on. You've been playing on one board. He's playing on 3, and one of them is sitting in your van. The line went dead. Linda's gaze darted between them. What the hell does that mean? Ethan was already moving toward the van door. It means we just stepped into the next game. They didn't sleep that night. Ethan tore through the van's interior, checking every panel, every hidden compartment, running his hands along the seams. Linda pulled the hard drives, scanning for anomalies, any sign someone had mirrored their data without permission. Claire sat at the folding table, the burner phone in front of her, replaying Pike's words. In her head, "One of them is sitting in your van. At 3:12 a.m., Linda's screen flickered. "Got something," she said. "Outbound signal from last week, routed through a proxy in Maryland. It's encrypted, but the packet size matches the files we pulled from Lorimer's ledger." Ethan leaned over her shoulder. "Where was it sent?" Linda hesitated. "Here's the thing, it didn't leave the van. The transmission originated from the backup rig under the bench seat." Claire frowned. "Only you set that up, Linda." Linda's face went tight, and Ethan had access when we were in Tacoma. The air in the van went still. For the first time since they'd started, the enemy wasn't just out there. It might be right across the table. Ethan was the first to break the silence. "All right," he said, voice low. "If Pike's telling the truth, we can't stay in. The same vehicle, we split up, run parallel checks. That way, if the leak's tied to one of us, it'll light up fast." Linda crossed her arms. "Or you're hoping I'll walk out so you can pin this on me without witnesses." Claire stepped in before it could turn into a shouting match. "Enough, we're not doing the broker's job for him. We split because it's the only way to prove who's clean. Ethan, you take the ledger copies to the safe house in Everett. Linda, you keep the main drives. I'll run point between you." Ethan grabbed his jacket. "And what if the leak isn't one of us?" Claire looked at the burner phone still lying on the table. "Then whoever it is, we'll think we're too busy tearing each other apart to see them coming." 2 hours later, Claire sat alone in a cheap motel room off the interstate, laptop open, monitoring 2 separate GPS trackers, one on Ethan, one on Linda. For a while, the dots moved like they should. Then, just past 5 a.m., Linda's signal jumped. 1 second she was heading north. The next, she was 30 miles west straight toward a gated property Claire recognized from a folder in the ledger. Her phone lit up with an incoming call. "No." "Number." She answered. The voice on the other end was smooth, familiar. "Morning, Ms. Hayes. I believe you found my house." The broker, Claire didn't speak at first. She let the silence stretch, knowing it would make him fill it. "You've been busy," the broker continued, his tone almost warm. "Poking around my books. Making quite the mess in polite society. What do you want?" She asked flatly. "I want you to understand that your friends are not who you think they are. Loyalty is fluid. Linda came to me the night before the fundraiser, said she was tired of running, tired of you." Claire forced her voice to stay level. "If that's true, why are you telling me instead of just letting her finish the job?" A soft chuckle. "Because I like games, Ms. Hayes. And in this one, I'd rather have you across the table than buried under it." Claire's eyes flicked to the tracker on her screen. Linda's dot was now stationary inside the broker's estate. "You want me to come to you. I want you to see the truth for yourself. Noon, no backup, or she doesn't walk out." The line clicked dead. The motel room felt smaller with every tick of the clock. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the burner phone like it might answer the question for her. Noon was less than 6 hours away. Ethan's dot on the tracker was still moving north, blissfully unaware. She considered calling him, then pictured the broker's smirk if she broke his no backup rule. She opened the duffel under the bed. Inside, a shoulder holster, 1 extra mag, a flash drive with red tape wrapped around it, and a single Polaroid of her, Ethan, and Linda from the first week they'd started this. Her gut told her it could be a trap. Her instincts told her walking in was suicide. But there was another voice, quieter, older, the one that had gotten her into this mess in the first place. "If you walk away now, you'll never know the truth." She zipped the duffel and stood by 11:50. She was at the wrought iron gates of the broker's estate. Rain slicked the long driveway, pooling under the guardhouse floodlights. A suited man with an earpiece stepped out, scanning her quickly. "Ms. Hayes, follow me." The walk-up felt like miles. Inside, the air was warm, scented with expensive wood, and something darker like old smoke. The broker was waiting in a leather chair, a glass of amber liquid in hand. "Right on time," he said, smiling, and then she saw Linda sitting across from him. Eyes shadowed, hands folded neatly in her lap. Claire didn't sit. She kept her coat on, water dripping from the hem, eyes fixed on Linda. "You all right?" Claire asked. Linda's gaze didn't waver. "I'm fine." The broker swirled his drink, watching them like a man enjoying his favorite play. "She came to me because she's tired, Ms. Hayes. Tired of running, tired of hiding in vans, tired of betting her life on a fight she can't win." Claire's voice was low. "And what did you offer her?" "A future," he said simply. "One where her skills pay her in something more than adrenaline and motel coffee. One where she doesn't end up in a ditch for the sake of your idealism." Linda leaned forward, finally speaking. "Claire, he's not wrong. We're outmatched. He has judges, cops, the press. You think one ledger changes that? You're going to get us both killed." Claire felt the weight of the room pressing in. "So you give him the rest of the files and what? He lets you walk?" The broker's smile didn't falter. "I don't break my word." Claire scanned Linda's face, looking for a crack, guilt, fear, anything. But what she saw instead was something colder, resolve. That's when Claire understood Linda hadn't come here to survive. She'd come here to win, and she was playing her own game. Claire kept her eyes on Linda, reading past the surface. The set of her shoulders. The way her right hand never strayed far from her jacket pocket. The faintest flicker in her left eye. When the broker said, "I don't break my word," it clicked. This wasn't surrender. This was infiltration. Claire didn't let her expression change. She turned to the broker. "So what happens now? You parade me in front of a camera as some sort of trophy?" He chuckled. "No, cameras are for public theater. This is personal." Linda shifted slightly in her seat, just enough for Claire to catch the flash of a USB drive, pinched between two fingers. Hidden from the broker's view, "She's got something. She needs me to play along." Claire let her voice go flat. "All right. You've made your point. Just tell me what you want in exchange for letting me walk." The broker leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the scent of his cologne and whiskey mixing in the air. "Everything. Every copy, every backup. You give me that, and this ends." From the corner of her eye, Claire saw Linda's head tilt the smallest fraction, stall him, and Claire knew, whatever game Linda was playing inside this mansion, the next move was hers. Claire leaned back in the chair, crossing her arms like she was weighing the offer. "You know," she said slowly, "when we first pulled that ledger, I thought you were just another crooked name in a system full of them. But you're different, aren't you? You don't just work the system, you are the system." The broker smiled faintly, swirling the ice in his glass. "Flattery from an enemy is the sweetest kind. But if you're stalling, don't. I've run this game longer than you've been alive." "I'm not stalling," Claire said, letting her tone drop into something almost conversational. "I'm trying to decide if you're worth giving up my life's work for." She let her words hang, watching Linda. Under the table, Linda's hand moved a slow, practiced motion, sliding the tiny USB into the port of the broker's laptop on the sideboard. Her body blocked the move from his line of sight, her other hand lifting a tumbler as if pouring herself water. The broker's eyes stayed locked on Claire. "You have 5 seconds." Claire leaned forward. "You think I came here to make a deal? No. I came here because I wanted to see what kind of man thinks he can buy his way out of truth." A faint click from the laptop. Linda's voice cut in smoothly, almost casual. "This water's warm. You should talk to your staff." The transfer was done, but before Claire could stand, the broker's smile vanished. "I appreciate the visit, Ms. Hayes, but now I think it's time you both stayed indefinitely." 2 armed men stepped into the room. The guards moved in fast, too fast for talk. Claire's chair screeched back as she stood, putting herself between Linda and the nearest man. The other moved toward the sideboard, eyes flicking to the still open laptop. "Don't touch it," the broker said sharply. That slip told Claire everything. Whatever Linda had just taken was valuable enough that he didn't want it destroyed. Before he knew what it was, Linda used the moment. She tipped the tumbler, sending water splashing across the hardwood floor and into the nearest guard's shoes. As he looked down, she yanked the USB free and palmed it. Claire seized the distraction, driving her elbow into the other guard's ribs. The man doubled over, and she grabbed his arm, spinning him into the first guard like two bowling pins. The broker stood now, not shouting, just watching, calculating. "If you walk out that door," he said evenly, "you'll have every badge in this city waiting for you." Claire grabbed Linda's wrist. "Then we don't use the door." They moved fast, cutting through a side hallway lined with oil paintings, the thud of boots behind them. Linda spotted a narrow service corridor and pulled Claire inside. It smelled of bleach and dust maintenance access. And at the far end, a steel door stood slightly ajar, night air spilling through. They didn't stop running until the estate was a shrinking silhouette in the rearview mirror of a stolen utility truck. Claire kept her eyes on the road. "Tell me you got it all." Linda's breath came quick, but her smile was grim. She held up the USB between two fingers. "I got more than we came for." They didn't risk opening the USB in the truck. Instead, Claire drove 2 counties over to a 24-hour storage facility she and Ethan had used as a dead drop. The place was empty except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the echo of their footsteps. Inside a locked unit, Linda plugged the USB into an air-gapped laptop machine that had never touched the internet. The screen lit up. Folders appeared, each labeled with dates and cryptic initials. Claire clicked one at random. It wasn't just financial records. It was surveillance videos, transcripts, entire email chains between the broker and half the city's power brokers, judges, senators, police chiefs. And then they found the real bombshell, a series of files marked Inside OPI. These weren't just about political deals, they were orders. False arrests, evidence tampering, planned accidents for anyone who threatened the network. One file made Claire's stomach drop. It was a full dossier on Ethan. Linda leaned closer. "They've been watching him since the day he left. Internal affairs. They know where he is. They know where he's headed." Claire snapped the laptop shut. "Then we move now, before they get to him first." She slipped the USB into her jacket pocket. "This isn't just about taking down the broker anymore. This is about keeping him from wiping us off the board." Linda's jaw tightened. "Then we hit him before sunrise." They left the storage unit within minutes, the USB secure in Claire's jacket and the laptop powered down. The rain had turned to a steady mist, making the city's sodium lights blur into amber halos. Ethan's tracker showed him still northbound, just outside Everett, but there was a second dot now closing in from the opposite direction. Claire didn't need a name to know whose it was. The broker's people were moving. Linda drove this time, pushing the stolen truck hard, weaving through industrial back roads to cut time. Claire kept refreshing the GPS feed, watching the gap shrink miles into yards. Then the signal stopped moving. They found Ethan's SUV, parked on the shoulder of a desolate logging road, driver's door open. Steam rose from the hood, and the windshield was cracked like it had been struck. "Ethan!" Claire's voice cut through the damp air as she drew her weapon. Linda circled wide, scanning the tree line. A muffled shout came from deeper in the woods. They followed it, moving fast but low, until they broke into a small clearing. 2 men in tactical gear had Ethan on his knees, hands zip-tied, one of them holding a suppressed pistol to his temple. The taller one turned at the sound of branches snapping. "We got company," Claire fired before he could finish, hitting the ground near his feet. "Drop it. Now." The second man swung toward her, but Linda was already moving, slamming into him with enough force to send the gun skidding into the mud. Ethan twisted, driving his shoulder into the first man's gut, buying Claire the moment she needed to close the distance and take him down. Within seconds, both attackers were face down, disarmed, and breathing hard into the dirt. Ethan looked up at Claire, chest heaving. "You're late." Claire managed a thin smile. "Traffic." They didn't go back to the van. It was too exposed now. Instead, the three of them headed straight for a contact Claire had kept quiet until this moment, a freelance data journalist named Marlowe, known for publishing stories so radioactive that mainstream outlets wouldn't touch them. Marlowe's office was a converted warehouse, lit only by desk lamps and the glow of a wall-sized monitor. He didn't ask questions when Claire slid the USB across the table. He just plugged it in and started copying. Linda stood watch at the window while Ethan paced behind Claire. "Once this is out there, it's not just him coming after us, it's everyone tied to him. That's the point," Claire said. "Make it so big they can't put it back in the box." File after file appeared on Marlowe's screen. Offshore accounts, blackmail material, contracts for hits dressed up as accidents. The kind of evidence that could topple careers overnight. Marlowe whistled low. "This isn't just a story. This is a wildfire." "Good," Claire said. "Light it." An hour later, the first leaks hit the encrypted news feeds. Within minutes, screenshots and documents were flooding social media. By dawn, every major network was running the story. The broker's name was everywhere alongside judges, senators, and police brass, who'd smiled for cameras hours earlier, and were now dodging reporters at their gates. Claire watched the chaos unfold on Marlowe's monitor. "We just broke the board," she murmured. Ethan glanced at her. "Yeah, but the game's not over." Outside, sirens wailed, not coming for them yet, but close enough to remind them they had just made the most dangerous enemies of their lives. By morning, the broadcasts were everywhere, names, faces, and bank accounts laid bare for the public. Government hotlines were swamped. Emergency inquiries launched overnight. Somewhere far from the noise, the broker sat in a dark room, the tip of his cigar glowing. On the desk before him, a new list of names: Claire, Ethan, Linda, freshly written in ink. "The game," he murmured, "has only just begun." The three of them scattered, each taking a different road out of the city. Claire took a job offer from a major paper. Ethan went back to internal affairs, this time with no leash. Linda disappeared completely, her trail cold within days. Original USB was locked away in an anonymous safe deposit box. One night, Claire received a small package. Inside was a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance, of her leaving the newsroom. In the corner of the frame, blurred but unmistakable, was a figure she recognized. She slid the photo into her coat pocket and kept walking, the city lights stretching ahead. The darkness was still out there, but this time she was ready for it. The story hit like a detonation. By the time the sun rose, every major network was running the leaked names, scrolling in bold across the ticker. Aerial shots of gated estates, split screens of senators and police chiefs declining to comment. Claire, Ethan, and Linda holed up in a safe house on the edge of the city. It wasn't much: bare concrete walls, a leaky radiator, a single lamp on a folding table, but it was quiet, and quiet was survival. Linda paced near the window. Half the city's in panic mode. Phones are going dark, accounts frozen. They'll eat each other alive before the day's over. "Not all of them," Ethan said, eyes fixed on his phone. "The ones who survive will regroup, and they'll be coming for us." Claire dumped a duffel on the table. Inside, burner phones, cash, fake IDs. "Then we don't stay put." They were still deciding their next move when a low hum rattled the windows. Claire crossed to the blinds and froze. A black SUV was idling at the curb. its tinted windows reflecting the streetlight like polished stone. "Someone found us," she said. No one moved for a beat. Then Linda reached into her jacket, palming the same USB drive they'd used to torch. "The broker's network. We split. 3 exits, 3 directions. If they get one of us, they don't get all of us." They moved fast, Claire out the front, Ethan through the basement hatch, Linda over the back fence. The SUV didn't move. Claire turned the corner, heart pounding. And that's when she saw it. A man leaning against a lamppost watching her. Not a hired thug, too casual. Too patient. He smiled like they were old friends. "Ms. Hayes," he said. "The broker would like a word." Claire's hand tightened on the strap of her bag. She didn't answer, she just ran. By nightfall, they'd scattered across 3 counties. Claire took the train south under a false name. Ethan drove west until the mountains swallowed the signal, and Linda disappeared into the grid of the city. 2 days later, a message arrived for all 3, same number, no traceable origin. 4 words: "You can't hide forever." Claire stared at the text, thumb hovering over the delete key, then slid the phone into her pocket. The game wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get worse. 3 days after the leak, the media storm began to shift. At first, it was whispers, anonymous tips to smaller blogs, blurry photos of Claire leaving buildings she'd never set foot in, quotes from sources close to law enforcement, hinting that the whistleblower was herself part of a criminal conspiracy. By the end of the week, the whispers had teeth. A primetime anchor leaned forward, face grave, and asked, "Is Claire Hayes the hero she claims? Or something much darker?" Ethan slammed the TV remote down. "He's flipping the narrative, making you the villain." "Not just me," Claire said, pulling a printed headline from her bag. It was Linda's face now, grainy and overexposed. With the caption, "Missing informant tied to police corruption case." Linda's voice came over the burner phone speaker, sharp but steady. "It's a smear campaign, classic broker. He can't erase the data, so he poisons the source." Claire rubbed her temples. "And if he gets the public to believe it, the case dies before it even gets to court." Ethan looked between them. "Then we have to make it impossible for them to bury it. More proof, more witnesses, and we go public again louder." "Louder means riskier," Linda said. "He's already watching every step we take." Claire glanced out the motel window. Across the street, a sedan had been parked in the same spot for hours. A man sat behind the wheel, pretending to scroll his phone. She turned back to Ethan. "We don't have time to be careful. We hit back now, or we lose everything." They needed a move. The broker couldn't ignore something so public. He'd be forced into the open. Marlowe, the journalist who'd helped break the first leak, had an idea. "You want him rattled? Name him, in front of cameras. No hiding behind files or documents. Call him out live." Ethan frowned. "That's not a move. That's painting a target on our backs." "Exactly," Claire said. "If he comes after us in daylight, the whole world will be watching." They set the stage at a crowded press conference outside City Hall. Cameras swiveled as Claire stepped up to the podium, flanked by Ethan and a hooded figure, Linda, finally showing her face. In 3 minutes, they laid it all out: the crimes, the names, the network, and finally, the broker. Claire didn't just say his name, she described him, his methods, his reach. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. And somewhere in the chaos, Claire caught sight of a man in the distance, standing perfectly still, watching her with an unreadable expression. The moment their eyes met, he turned and melted into the sea of bodies. Linda leaned close. "He was here." Claire nodded, her pulse pounding. "Good. Now he knows this is war." They didn't have to wait long. 2 nights after the press conference, Claire's burner phone lit up with a single address. No threats, no demands, just coordinates to an abandoned railway yard on the edge of the city. Ethan wanted backup. Linda wanted snipers. Claire shook her head. If we bring an army, he won't show. This is between me and him." The yard was silent except for the wind, rattling loose sheet metal. Claire walked between rusted boxcars until she saw him standing in the open, hands in his pockets as if they were meeting for coffee. "Impressive show," the broker said. "But you've made yourself a very expensive problem." Claire stepped closer. "You're done. The files are out, the press has your name, and every move you make now just proves us right." He smiled faintly. "Files can be discredited. Witnesses can disappear. That's why I brought a camera." She tilted her head toward a rooftop where a red light blinked in the dark. "Everything you say here goes live to every outlet in the country." For the first time, his smile faltered. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Claire didn't move until the first floodlights hit the yard. By the time the tactical team swarmed in, the broker's hands were raised as they led him away. He glanced back over his shoulder. "You think this ends with me? You have no idea how deep it goes." Claire watched him disappear into the swarm of uniforms. "Then we'll keep digging." Weeks later, Claire sat alone in her new apartment, the city skyline glowing through the window. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. A single message appeared. "Nice work. Now let's talk about your next target." Attached was a photo. A dimly lit room, a wall covered in names and red string. In the center, a single word, Phoenix. Claire leaned back in her chair, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. The game wasn't over. It had just leveled up. In the end, the broker was taken away in handcuffs, but his last words still echo. "You have no idea how deep it goes." Claire walked away knowing she'd won a battle. Yet the war was far from over, because for every name on that list, there are 10 more waiting in the shadows. If there's one thing this story proves, it's that the truth isn't free, but it's worth every risk. Thanks for watching, and if you want to stand with us for the next fight, go ahead and subscribe. We've only just begun.